Thank you.
Great to meet you, Michael. My goodness me, you're doing so much. But we have to go back, as I always do with my guests. I take you back to your last year in school. Tell me a bit about that and what you were thinking.
Okay. First thought was, when is it going to end? I thought, how can I get out of here? I went to school I left school at 16 with a leaving cert, very basic leaving cert at the time. The style of teaching at the time didn't work for me. So I couldn't wait to get out, to be honest, and get into the world of work and the university of learning in life rather than a college.
Sure.
Which I did. And at the time, jobs were, if you weren't back then, if you weren't, college wasn't available for everybody. And it wasn't for me at that time. So I did many jobs. I worked in shops and supermarkets, warehouses. I drove trucks, vans, taxi for a while. And then I did that over 7 or 8 year periods. And then
how did you find that? I mean, it's a very varied, and of course you would have been mixing with the public quite a lot. How did you find that sort of interaction?
A lesson in life, for sure.
Yes.
I really enjoyed it, but you did have to, of course, being young as well helped. You learned an awful lot about people.
Yeah.
We're dealing with the public, the different personalities, how they operate. Learning how one person could be one way and another the other way, that are different to you, how you operate, and processing that. You didn't realize at the time you're processing it, but that's what you're doing. So but it was a good grounding. When you're in a shop or a supermarket, for example, and you're basically getting abused by your customer, it's a learning process.
Well, you hope it is.
But then, look, the positives will always, the pros always outweigh the cons and these type of things. So I really enjoyed it, and I enjoyed moving around, and I saw a lot of the country at a young age, traveling around all of the counties.
Great.
And the bigger shops, the smaller shops, the villages, right, the west of Ireland, the south of Ireland, all of those places that a lot of people wouldn't get to over a couple of years. And I did them in summer and winter, and winter was winter. Well, when winters were winters.
Yeah. But it's a great experience for you. And I mean, the ability to be able to change jobs was a fantastic time. But there were sort of darker times ahead in terms of employment.
Oh, there were, yeah. I mean, the 80s were terrible, and I hear people comparing the recessions. I would say there's no such thing as a good one, that's for sure.
That's true.
And in a way, the 80s one was, practically everybody was in the same boat. That didn't happen in the last one, which was different. But for me, I applied for and was lucky enough to get into Aer Lingus at the time in that recession, And Aer Lingus, it was ironic, like back at the time, there was 12,500 people that applied for 20 jobs,
Wow.
And there were interviews out in the Alsa Club there in Artane at that time, or Alsa Club in the airport at that time, by your alphabet letter over the days. There was that such demand.
Goodness.
I got in. I worked then in Aer Lingus from around 26 to about 40. In that time, I loved my time out there. I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot about myself and structure.
Right.
I worked on ground operations. So initially started loading and cleaning aircraft, and went from that to leading crews, and then got engaged in the safety element, because there's a big safety element when you're working around aircraft.
Sure.
We all think of it up in the air, but on the ground it's quite significant. So I went back. I got engaged there in worker representation. So in the union as a worker representative, and I really enjoyed that role, and it got me engaged. And I went back in 1990 when I reached 30. I decided with the role I was doing, I should go back to school and try it. And I must say that was very challenging at the time.
Yeah, it must have been. I mean, for somebody who sort of left school thinking to themselves, wow, the way education is here, this is a tough one. But I mean, tell me just a bit about Aer Lingus. I mean, they must have seen something special in you to pick you as one of 20 out of 12,000.
Well, I'd done a couple of summers, you see. There was a little bit around service, and if you had done a couple of summer seasons, that you're up the list and you're in the last whatever. So that I would say is well done. So the references were good from the summers, and that's what turned the key.
But you also sort of developed a passion for human behaviour around that time in working with Aer Lingus.
Yeah, I did. And as a worker representative, what I found was that as you learn in life, and you see in all organisations, and as part of what I do now in helping people in
Mm.
organisations, is we're all different, but we're all the same. And I found that some of the most challenging people in managerial structures were also quite behind it, very decent human beings who had struggles. And the same on the worker side, when people found themselves in trouble, there was always a reason for it,
Yeah.
that was behind it, and that fascinated me and brought me towards study, and it probably brought me back to my own time in school, how I viewed school.
Yeah, I mean, you went on, as I said, to get involved in industrial relations in terms of getting a diploma in it. I suppose the one real difference was you weren't subjected to corporal punishment then.
Exactly, yeah. You're subjected to or delivering it, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And when I went into, it was the Jesuit college. I went first to over in the National College of Industrial Relations in Ranelagh, where at that time all UIR people went to, where there were going to be personnel managers at that time, or human resource managers, and people who aspired to be union officials. But for me, when I went in, it was quite challenging to actually even go in the doors, pay the money, go in the doors, and sit back in the classroom. And
Right.
then after a couple of weeks, when you realise, it's funny how your mind works from being a young person, and a couple of years later, when you find yourself at 30 and you want to develop, and you're in there and you're contributing to conversations and engaged in negotiating practice and all the rest, and you realise, and this is again why I do the other work that I do, you realise yourself that, geez, I'll be fairly bright now, rather
Hmm.
than the way you thought when you were in school in those days of corporal punishment. So I would say for me that course was a turning point in my life.
Right. And the fact that you found that education and accessing it was a different experience to what you had before, but it had the ability to kind of adjust to it.
Yeah, exactly. And there is a challenge, and part of the work that I do now is helping people to get over the challenges that stop them doing something to reach their potential or help them meet their potential. But yeah, that's absolutely true, Alex. And when I got to the exams and that, again, those old style concerns will come back, because I didn't really do too well in the Leaving Cert, but found that because it was relating to life and to me, and I was passionate about it, that was a whole different story. I went right up the grades as well. So I brought the practice, the experience, and the academic side to it then, which
And
for
I
me was a great learning point.
and it does show you that when you do have a passion for something, how you can immerse yourself in it, and it doesn't seem like a chore anymore.
Yeah, and it's one of the lessons in life, isn't it? And it's when I'm coaching, it's one of the key pieces in coaching is to get people to look for their passion, look for the purpose, and when they find their purpose in life, not to give up on it, that they'll find it, and when they find it, that it stops becoming like work. They're out
And
there doing what they want to do.
and then you found yourself heading out to UCD. My goodness me, that's a big jump.
Yeah, and a bigger challenge, because it was a much more formal college.
Hmm.
And I went out because I was in the area of industrial relations. I wanted, I was 30 with a relatively young family. I wanted to develop myself, I suppose, more. That I was at the stage now where I was thinking of moving on and going up the grades in terms of prosperity and structure and all the rest. So I decided that I would add strings to the bow. And for the workplace, the occupational safety management was the next one, really, to add to it. And at the time, it was coming, I suppose. In the early mid 90s, it was coming. So I went to the 3 years higher diploma and did very, very well in that one. And then I had the two skill sets uh, to bring to the table. And following that, I applied for and got a job in SIP2 as an industrial relations official.
But in fact, before you kind of got to SIP2, you were designing courses for Aer Lingus at the
I
time.
was, I was, yeah. At the time, there was a problem around Europe where aircraft were being damaged on the ground a lot, and
Wow.
it was contributing, well, a lot as in 1%, but
Yeah, but it's expensive
point
stuff,
one
you
is
know.
it's too much. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And if they go up in the air that way, you have a different problem. So
Yeah.
the aerospace research department in Trinity College was led by an ex chief captain in Aer Lingus who had designed the European program. And we piloted it at Dublin Airport, and I was asked to get engaged in it, and I did. And I became lead tutor in that program. The SCARF program is what it was called. And that again boosted the confidence, and showed me what I could do out there in the world in terms of coaching, facilitating, developing. And I ran that then at the airport for about 5 years, up to 95 to 2000, yeah.
One of the strange things, and people tend to forget back in those days, Aer Lingus, free flights for their staff, and you decided to leave that to move to SIP2. My goodness, they must have been offering you something there to encourage you.
Yeah, well, it was one of those things where at the time everybody's stellar job is, I know looking back at it now, it's different as times change. But it was Aer Lingus or the ESB at the time were the sort of two that people wanted most. And for me, it was Aer Lingus, and I was lucky enough to get in there. But when the SIP2 one came along, I had, as a person, I had developed, and the career in there, and I did quite a bit of travel with Aer Lingus and with the family as well. So I wanted to develop myself at this stage. So in order to put the skills of industrial relations and training, development and safety into play, which could add to the salary, it meant stepping off that particular bus or plane. And I ended up going to SIP2, following an interview process there. So I was an industrial relations official with SIP2 for a while, and then I was asked up to SIP2 College, where I spent the next probably 4.5 years, designing, delivering, and evaluating training programs for safety representatives, train-the-trainer type programs for anyone who had to make any form of presentation, which was part of the role of a representative, go to conciliation or labour court or that type of thing.
I suppose most people tend to think of sort of trade unions as being quite conflict orientated. How did you sort of manage that sort of culture maybe within the organisation, or maybe your perception of culture?
Yeah, no, it was. I found it different because I found it different that they weren't as conflictorial as I thought that might be. That there was like the them and us. It was more about moving towards us together as a group. Partnership had just come in, so we're trying to work more and more with employers and employers with unions. Now, look, there's always that natural. It's all about, at the end of the day, it's about money and expense and cost. So that conflict is always going to be there, but it was probably slightly lesser. In fact, the demands, I think, of membership I found that quite difficult because there was so many demands at the time, and we were locked into a partnership, so that was challenging. And then the Celtic Tiger came, which so expectations rose. So that part was challenging.
In terms of kind of, as you said, moving on, you got involved in designing training programs. What do you think are the sort of key requirements or the key aspects of a good training program?
Well, you have to know what you want the people to know. There's a training gap that has to be filled. So first of all, you've got to be sure what your objectives are going to be. And then you've got to know your audience. So you've got to train. There's no point in training people if they're not going to gain and learn from it, so that you can implement whatever it is, the strategy that you want at the end of it.
And do you think your experience maybe at school and then seeing a difference in the form of education through the colleges might have helped you in creating those sort of training programs?
Yeah, hugely. I would say it developed me as a people person.
Right.
So I do find that when I really enjoy facilitating groups. I think the earlier days of the schooling, going out into the world of university life, as we sort of referred to earlier on, then going back into education, and then the different roles I had, I was able to see myself then as a fairly skilled individual.
And then, I mean, there's an extra sort of string to your bow here in the sense of training the trainer, because again, it suggests that you have a particular way of looking at these training courses and being able to get them across, not alone to the students, but also to help people deliver them in the right way.
Yeah, yes, indeed. And that's why I did a master's in DCU, because I wanted to add that piece. But I suppose one of the experiences that I had in an earlier life was I was asked to make a presentation somewhere, and I didn't do it because I was nervous, and I don't know, I made a really silly excuse to get out of it.
Right.
I don't know what it was at the time, but I did. But I actually found myself joking the closer I got to it. I think it was around 27 or 28 at the time. And I remember saying, I have to change my life because
Right.
that isn't on. Because I knew I had the skills to do this, but it was stopping me. But then it was probably a bit of a reverting back to school
Hey.
in the earlier days, you know.
Yeah,
So
it's amazing the way it sticks with you.
yeah,
I suppose then at that stage you'd really kind of found your purpose in life.
absolutely. Oh, absolutely. And at 40, then some people told me I was mad to do it, but I found the Tivoli Institute in Dunleary. I was starting to really understand how humans worked, but I was also recognizing that I had barriers to where I was at myself. You know, through your own life, your own process, your own experiences, and school and all the rest. So I went and I did a diploma in the Tivoli Institute, higher diploma, a 4-year one in the
Mm.
Tivoli Institute in Dunleary, to become a psychotherapist. And it was the most, I suppose, mind-opening experience that you would have, and really difficult over a 4-year period to do that training, but to come out a whole person at the other side of that, knowing what it is that you want to do, and having other skills that you can integrate into your week as a consultant, which I operate as. That was just a fantastic journey for me.
Tell me more about that psychotherapy course. I mean, what was sort of structure and your purpose for going in, and what did you come away with in more tangible way?
Yeah. So the structure was, it was a 3-year program. It was a 4-year altogether. It was an introductory part to it, but the 3 years was a combination of theory and practice, very, very detailed theory versus practice. Then there was skill sessions every other week, and then there was group therapy once a month on a Sunday, which was 8 hours on a Sunday once a
Wow.
month. Yeah, it was one of those where what's to say, you get stripped down and built back up again. It was
Mm.
one of those ones. And in terms of life journey for me, I was ready for that particular road and come out of it. What I got out from the other side was that I became, I would argue, very aware of uh, the things that hold people back. I
Right.
was already a competent trainer. I'm now a psychotherapist, and my experience in the workplace, I decided to start to practice in Fairview at that time, and I've practiced clinically sort of 2 days a week every year since then, along with the other consultancy pieces that I did in my week up till 2018.
So you decided to enter the world of the self-employed. I'm sure that must have been a seismic decision to make, and without the certainty of an income from it.
Yeah, it sort of was and it wasn't. SIP2, who I work for, is a good organisation to work for. Salary was good and all the rest, but I was at that stage in my life where, I was 43 or 4, and I decided, I was doing okay. Home wise was grand. Kids were sort of well on their way up. And I thought, now this is another opportunity here for me now to just be who I am myself. So I did, and I went out and did my own thing. Now, the reason it wasn't as seismic. It
Mm.
was a big decision, but it wasn't as seismic because I had all over my working life. I've kept really good connections,
Yeah,
and
and
I've
this
made
is
good connections.
the power
Sorry.
of network, the power of networking.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And you know them, they know you, they know your value, they know what you bring to the table, and that was probably a part of me skilling up over the years. So I bring a set of skills to the table that are in demand.
Right.
So I wasn't that fearful of that.
I mean, little could you see when you left school at 16 that you'd find yourself not alone academically trained, but also now getting inside people's heads and helping them adjust their own lives.
Yeah, and look, I think you said it there. I found my own purpose, and it is my purpose. I'm very passionate about it, and one of the things I actually love about it, that when I flash back to where I was at, um, you're sitting down sometimes with CEOs of companies, and they're worth 30, 40, 50 million quid,
Mm.
and they're asking you, they're stuck here with their life, and you're working with them,
Yeah.
and it's like, it's so ironic, and that you're coming from where you're coming from, and now you're sitting here with this person. But to me, that's the beauty of life.
Yeah, it's a certain
You know,
irony about it as well. That,
yeah,
as they say,
yeah,
money doesn't buy happiness, and you've seen that for yourself.
Absolutely, yeah. And then the other side of that, though, as well, is, the person who never went to school even,
Yes.
or went to very little school and had all this, really had a school of hard knocks, that once they're given an opportunity or there's a path to grow and they take it, they can move mountains. It's phenomenal what they can do in terms of, because they're passionate then to keep going. So I just think it's a great job that I do. I meet all sorts of people. I'm providing good service to organizations, and I'm meeting the best of them, and I get well paid for it. So
Yeah, there you are. It's ticking all the boxes for you. But this is about finding something you have a passion for,
yeah,
and knowledge about, and able to deliver something of real value to people. And
yeah,
let me just ask you something around the self-employed route. I mean, as somebody who was mainly had a variety of jobs in the early days, then went to work for your safe pensionable job in Aer Lingus, kind of then moved on to SIP2. You were always an employee. Tell me, what were the particular challenges around entering the world of the self-employed?
yeah. Well, everything became your problem, doesn't it? 'Cause, yeah, you are that person, to go from buying equipment to advertising to insurances to the revenue, making sure that that's all up to speed, chasing the customers. So you're the one-stop shop for everything. They're the challenges of it. Um, if there's a fear, if there was a fear of it, I wouldn't have done it.
Sure.
I've made calculated risks along the way, as we all do.
Mm.
I made one calculated risk years ago. I invested quite a few quid in something, and it was gone within a year. And I mean, gone. It's like, whoa, that hurt. But it was a calculated risk.
Yeah.
But you do that. But I was always confident. Once I got to the stage of 38, 39, 40, I knew I was good at what I'm doing now, which is working right across a number of organizations, helping people from the top right down and in the middle. Once I had that, I knew I'd be good, because I have confidence in myself and I know what I have to sell.
It's interesting you talk about having confidence in yourself. I know many people who are business owners come across something which you probably run into from time to time in terms of your clients, imposter syndrome.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Explain to our listeners about imposter syndrome.
Yeah, I mean, we've all been there
Oh
probably,
yeah,
and
hands up for that.
the person who says that they haven't is completely somewhere else. But it is, they can't believe how lucky they are. Am I here? It's really about not feeling good enough.
Yeah.
A lot of people have done really, really well in life. They're drivers because they didn't feel good enough.
Hmm.
And they get to a stage where they keep going and going. And then, lady luck kicks in as well, combined with their drive and their ability and skills. And they end up in a place like, Jesus, how did I get here? I don't deserve this. So they feel
Yeah.
like imposters. But they're not. They've worked very blooming hard to get where they got to.
Yeah.
But the imposter piece is something that's sitting there for them for a very long time.
Oh, I think it visits us all from time to time.
Yeah.
It does indeed.
Mm.
Listen, but let me kind of come to more recent times. I mean, with the business, you've built up quite a substantial business there. With how many? I think you mentioned about 12 associates. Is that?
Yeah, about 12 partners I work with now. The partners, they're organizations.
Yeah.
And what I'd say I offer in 2018, I saw a gap. Ironically, it's COVID is there now, but in 2018, there was a real gap in people are working harder, longer, expected to do more. In fact, the Irish the old saying that the Irish used to work to live, and then it just became live to work, almost like the American style over a couple of years. But in 2018, I noticed, I knew, I was asked by a number of people that big organizations have EAPs in place, employee assistance programs, through big companies that support them. But what's happening is there's a gap there where if I'm an employee in a big company and I'm feeling stressed or anxious about whatever, and it's affecting my life, my work, me, whatever, and I go to use the employee assistance service, that I get an answering machine somewhere in the UK, not knocking it, that's fair enough, that's what it is. I get a call back a few days after that, maybe a week, 2 weeks, then I get an appointment set up. There's 2 weeks gone where a person may be out of work,
Sure.
sliding down the scale. I provide a service, a very niche service, and that's why I've 12 organizations. I get to 23 or 24 or 25 and I'll stop, because I want to be able to keep this promise up. And my promise is to to organizations is that I will catch the person within 24 hours of contacting me. And within that 24 hours, we'll have an initial plan in place. That plan will be coaching, counseling, or wherever it needs to be for them. And then over a 6-week period, we'll get them into a place. And this is what people need. Vast majority of people just need to reframe their thinking, time out of the system with someone who knows what they're talking about, that's competent, and to help them back in.
I think it's quite interesting that quite a number of organizations have recognized the challenge that their employees have. But strangely enough, a lot of the challenge the employees have is being created by the employers themselves.
Yeah, that is a big one, and it's the whole organizational occupational stress element of it, and it's one of those things that's going to have to be grasped. Right now it's not in COVID times, and it's needed most probably, but it's an area. I know that organizations are really looking at this the last couple of years, but it's how to manage it, and it's going to, no matter what size the organization is, the challenge is really big. But in terms of the occupational stress, it comes under occupational safety. It becomes a hazard, a risk assessment, and what's your controls. And for the organizations that I work with, I'm going to give you an example without mentioning names. I started to work with one very reputable trade union organization. Well, they're all reputable, but one very well-known one. Maybe 6 months ago, 5 months ago.
Yeah.
And within that time, very short space of time, we've been able to put in a wellness team, provide the support service that we have in place, and working on a wellness calendar already. So it's literally within 4 months, actually. So when the commitment is there, it can be done. But the organization have to recognize it. A lot of them don't know how to go about it.
Yeah, I mean, I believe you'd have to get to the root cause of it, and the organization has to be responsible enough to recognize where the root cause is and then change, as opposed to putting a sticking plaster on it.
Exactly, yeah. And it's got to go to the root, and it's got to work with the people that's in the organization. And once that approach is taken, it'll work. There'll always be challenges within it, because you got business, you got to keep it going. There's all those sorts of challenges there. But when you've got some system in place that is practical and has a common sense approach to it, and a support service for the employees, it'll work. It'll bring them on a long way, and the motivation goes up, the absences decrease, and then the commitment to the organization goes up as well. So it really is a win-win.
Yeah, I mean, people tend to think in organizations, oh, this is a cost, when in fact it's an investment, and they don't realize the real cost if you don't deal with these particular issues within your own organization.
Yeah, and you can see it in the UK now at the moment. Over the last probably 3 or 4 years in the UK, the cases for occupational stress they're really going up there, and the figures that's on them is crazy money. And if they had invested in methods of control at that time, and it's really not a huge thing to do. It's small money by comparison. It's a bit like the safety, if you like, and as part of safety, the small investment saves an awful lot of money, whereas if you ignore it, it costs you an awful lot of money. And your insurance company won't be long telling you that at the end of the day.
Well, I think that's a great message to finish on. Would you like to tell me, Michael, and tell our listeners where they can find out more about you?
Yeah, certainly. I can be found at ows.ie, Occupational Wellness Solutions, www.ows.ie, and all the information is there.